Remember now that since the creative God has made us in His image and likeness, His, her, it, and likeness of this creative source, so man can, in his own mind, bring forth that which is limited and sometimes very discordant on a very limited basis. It doesn't last forever. It is just in this very physical plane. We see it. Some people have, if they're thieves, they have thieving ideas in their mind. They will thief. They will go to jail. They will have that kind of a life. Another person may not think along that line whatsoever and can't manifest it. Now, we ought to look at the outward form in the body and say, I don't think I like myself very well. We have a tendency to do that. The first thing we do in the morning, at least I do, and I think a lot of people do, is get up and look in the mirror. Oh, come on, give yourself a break. I mean, that is just what you see of yourself, what you are manifesting of yourself right now. But behind all that, behind the hair all sticking up, haven't got the lipstick on, looking and can't comb your hair, won't comb, and this thing pops up in the, you can't get it down and you're using hairs. Well, beyond all of that stuff is this infinite presence and an infinite God manifesting infinite man. So don't get too wrapped up in what you see in the mirror, because that's in a changing state. Do you know that in the last say will take 2,000 years? If you 2,000 years ago looked in the, if you were a man and looked in the mirror, you would be approximately 5'2". That's what you would be. Then if you looked at yourself in the 1800s, you might be about 5'7" or 8". And now in 2010, it is not unusual, believe it or not, for men to be 6'5" and 6'6". And it is not unusual anymore for women to be 6 feet tall. So you see, there's this change taking place all the time in people. Now, the textbook gives us some good advice when it says, in truth, the body always stands as a holy temple of God, the good. Therefore, speak truth of it. Affirm that it is eternal substance, living substance, God idea expressed. See yourself as an idea of God, being expressed in a most wonderful way. I am the eternal idea of God. I was brought forth by God. Now, my grandson was 7 or 8 years old, and he asked an eternal question. He said, how are babies born? Well, so we all went, but I told him that he was an idea, God thought him up. That's pretty much what it was. God thought him up, and just God loves him very, very much. Now, the textbook also gives us some really excellent advice. It says, in truth, the body always stands for the holy temple of God. Don't forget that. Remember that no matter what seems to be going on in the outward world, that in the mind of God, good only, good is there, and God recognizes only good. God sees you as a good person. God loves you and sees you as a good person. It's very important when we're dealing with the sick. And if we're in the medical field, or we're in the psychological field, or in the counseling field, that we see beyond the problem that is existing and know that this individual before me right now is God's child. When my daughter was having a liver transplant, at the morning of the transplant, she had been in and out of comas, very, very critically ill. We had an opportunity to go down and eat some of the famous Baptist Hospital biscuits and gravy. And while we were there, her doctor showed up, but we didn't really know him too much. And he came and sat with us. And we didn't know what hardly to think, but he just came and sat down with us. And he said, I want to tell you something. I was willing to listen. We were desperate. He said, I don't do this. God does it. I see this individual as God's child, and I remove anything that's offensive and I replace it with something good. That's what I do. and your daughter is going to be okay. Your mother is going to be okay. That's what I do. And he got up and left. You see, we think of doctors as very self-assertive and think that they are some kind of the infinite presence all by themselves. But you know what? Here was a man who knew he couldn't do it by himself. That he had to search and look for another power and presence that would help him and move his hands and help this woman who was so desperate for life. Remember, no matter what seems to be going on in the outward world, that it is that we are God's infinite expression. Now, let's get two different definitions clear. And they're very interesting. First of all, the definition of world. Now, the world, says our textbook, is the outpicturing of a limited concept of creation, obscuring God's true creation. Now, before you get all excited and think that we don't believe that any of this exists, let's just quiet down and let's understand clearly what we're talking about. Now, this term world, that's why the Bible tells us not to be part of the world and to be separate from it. Remember that what we see, hear, feel, smell, taste, touch in our world is limited and comes from a very limited concept. It is as we see things. Dr. Irwin Gregg, the great divine scientist, was once asked, what is this? And he said, it's just as much of God as we can bring forth at this time. At this time. This is where it is. This view is made up of what we think about ourselves and our physical form. If you think that you are not worthy, you will manifest that in some ways. It'll come forth in some way or another. You ever met somebody that's very, very backward and shy and cannot really function in life very well? And they'll manifest that in their outward affairs. You see them. You see them. And then there's the other people who have this very positive attitude. I've told you before about when I was in St. Louis, Missouri, there was a lady, and she wore her lipstick extremely heavy. And she would come through the line when I was shaking hands, and I knew she was going to kiss me. It was written in the stars that she was going to kiss me. And everybody was in line knew she was going to kiss me. She was going to kiss me, and that's all there was to it. And she would. And she would get lipstick all over my collar, all over the robe that I wore. She would, well, anyhow, but she was very assertive, and so she manifested it.